You are on Tips and Streams with your host, Coca.
What's good, everyone? Welcome back to Tips and Streams. I'm Kokan, and I hope you're doing well and feeling locked in wherever you're listening from. All right, let's get to the daily picks. I've got 4 NBA matchups on the card today, so buckle up, we're diving straight into the action. The first prediction for today's NBA games is for the game between the Los Angeles Clippers and the Toronto Raptors. When I break down this matchup between Toronto and Los Angeles, the first thing that jumps off the page for me is timing. Not just who's playing well, but how they're playing and why they're winning right now. And that's where my edge starts. Toronto has earned real respect this season. I like the way they move the ball, I like how connected they are defensively, and I especially respect how disciplined they've been at home. Their identity is built on sharing the ball, defending without fouling too much, and making teams work late into the shot clock. That structure has carried them through some tough stretches. But this matchup isn't about structure alone. It's about shot creation under pressure. And that's where I start leaning heavily toward Los Angeles. The Clippers are not the same team they were earlier in the season. I've watched this turnaround closely, and it's real. Their defense has tightened. Their pace has slowed the game down to their terms. And most importantly, they've found a reliable rhythm late in games. That matters against a Toronto team that thrives when opponents play loose. What I really trust here is how Los Angeles controls possessions. They don't rush, they don't gamble, and they're comfortable winning ugly. Even when the game tightens, they don't panic. That's a veteran trait, and it shows up most clearly in fourth quarters. Toronto is dealing with rotation issues, and that limits flexibility. When you shorten the bench against a team that thrives in isolation scoring, every defensive mistake gets punished. I don't think Toronto collapses, far from it, but I do think they're forced into tougher shots down the stretch. I also can't ignore the recent head-to-head history. Los Angeles has consistently handled these spots better, especially when the game turns into a half-court grind. That's exactly the style I expect tonight. So when I put everything together, current form, late-game execution, matchup tendencies, and roster availability, I know where I stand. I'm riding with Los Angeles to win this game and cover the 1.5-point spread. It's not flashy. It's not emotional. It's a disciplined play built on control, experience, and execution. My money is on the Clippers to get it done. Today's second prediction is for the game between the Washington Wizards and the Sacramento Kings. When I break this matchup down, I see two teams heading in opposite emotional directions, but not necessarily separated by the margin the market suggests. Sacramento comes in riding a rare wave of confidence, and yes, they deserve credit for stacking quality wins at home. I've watched this league long enough to recognize when momentum is real, but I've also seen plenty of situations where that momentum inflates expectations beyond what the numbers can actually support. Sacramento's recent stretch has been fueled by shot-making and individual scoring bursts. DeMar DeRozan continues to live in that mid-range comfort zone where defenders know what's coming and still can't stop it. Zach LaVine brings downhill pressure and quick offense, while Russell Westbrook has injected energy, rebounding, and pace. When this group gets rolling, they look dangerous. But that danger comes in waves, not quarters. The problem I keep coming back to is sustainability. Sacramento still struggles to control games late, still bleeds possessions on the glass, and still allows opponents to hang around longer than they should. Even at home, they've had far too many games where the fourth quarter turns into survival mode. That matters when you're asked to separate by multiple possessions. Now let's talk about Washington, because this is where experience tells me not to blindly follow the standings. Yes, the Wizards are shorthanded. Yes, the roster has been shaken by trades and injuries. but effort and structure still show up on film. This team protects the rim, blocks shots at an elite level, and plays with young legs that don't quit even when the scoreboard says they should. Alex Sarr anchors everything defensively. His presence alone changes how opponents attack the paint. Keyshawn George continues to grow into a reliable creator who can score, rebound, and facilitate without forcing the issue. This Wizards group may not close games well, but they compete. And competition is exactly what you need when you're catching a big number. From a matchup perspective, I don't see Sacramento having a clear physical advantage inside, especially if their front court rotation remains unsettled. Washington's length and rim protection give them a way to stay attached even when shots aren't falling. And historically, these meetings tend to stay closer than expected, especially when the underdog plays loose and the favorite feels the pressure to dominate. This is where my analyst instinct kicks in. I'm not here to predict who looks better on paper. I'm here to predict how the game actually breathes over 48 minutes. Sacramento can win, absolutely, but asking them to win comfortably is a different question entirely. I'm riding with the Washington Wizards to cover the 9-point spread. I expect Sacramento to control stretches, but I trust Washington's defense, length, and effort to keep this game within reach. For me, this is about value, discipline, and reading the flow, not chasing recent headlines. My money is on the Wizards to hang around, absorb pressure, and make this a far tighter game than most people expect. The third prediction for today is for the game between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Houston Rockets. When I break down this matchup in Houston, I don't start with the logo on the floor or the home crowd. I start with rhythm, timing, and situation. And from where I'm standing, everything about this spot points toward Minnesota being the sharper side, even walking into a tough building. Houston is clearly in a rough stretch. I've watched this team struggle to generate clean offense night after night, and the eye test matches the numbers. The pace has slowed to a crawl, the ball movement has stalled, and far too often they're relying on difficult shots late in the clock. That's not sustainable basketball, especially when legs are heavy and confidence is shaky. Getting run off your own floor recently exposed more than just a bad shooting night. It showed a team pressing instead of playing free. What really concerns me is how flat Houston looks offensively in recent games. Scoring droughts have become common, and once frustration sets in, the defensive effort starts leaking as well. Yes, they still rebound well and they fight in the paint, but basketball games aren't won by effort alone. They're won by execution, and Houston hasn't executed consistently lately. Now, when I flip to Minnesota, I see the opposite trend. This team is locked in. Even without their primary scorer, they've shown poise, spacing, and confidence. I love how they've shared the ball, trusted the pass, and punished defenses that overhelp. Watching them dismantle a top opponent on the road without their star told me everything I needed to know about their mental state. This is a connected group, playing with clarity. What stands out to me most is Minnesota's balance. They're not dependent on one creator, and when defenses collapse, they make the extra pass. Their perimeter shooting has been sharp. Their transition decision-making has been excellent, and defensively, they close quarters strong. I also trust this group late in games. They don't panic, they don't rush, and they understand how to manage momentum. The scheduling angle matters here too. Houston is coming off an emotionally and physically draining situation, while Minnesota has had time to reset, prepare, and focus solely on this matchup. That's a real edge in this league, and I never ignore it. So when I line everything up, recent form, offensive flow, rest, confidence, and execution, I see value on the Minnesota side. I'm not asking them to dominate the game from start to finish. I'm asking them to stay competitive, play their brand of basketball, and capitalize on a Houston team that's still searching for answers. I'm taking the Minnesota Timberwolves to cover the 6-point spread in Houston. I trust their structure, their discipline, and their ability to stay composed in a tough environment. This is a spot where the sharper team covers, and for me, that team is Minnesota. Today's last prediction is for the game between the Chicago Bulls and the Brooklyn Nets. When I break this matchup down from top to bottom, I see two teams coming in with very different storylines, but the same problem: inconsistency. Still, for me, context matters more than records, and tonight's setting in Brooklyn changes how I read this game. I'll start with the Nets, because despite the ugly recent stretch, I don't think they're playing as badly as the win column suggests. I've watched enough basketball to know that close losses tell a different story than blowouts, and Brooklyn has been living in tight games lately. They've been competitive deep into fourth quarters, controlling tempo for long stretches, but losing discipline late. That's a focus issue, not a talent issue. Offensively, this team isn't explosive, but they're deliberate. When they get into their half-court sets and slow the game down, they can force opponents into uncomfortable possessions. I especially like how Brooklyn limits opponent perimeter rhythm. They're willing to concede attempts, but they contest late and make teams work for clean looks. That matters against a Chicago squad that depends heavily on flow scoring. Chicago, on the other hand, still feels fragile to me. Yes, they've picked up a couple of wins recently, but those games required perfect offensive execution and late-game heroics. That's not something I trust on the road. The Bulls are at their best when they're scoring early and often, but when that initial rhythm disappears, their defense doesn't have the tools to carry them through tough stretches. In this matchup specifically, I keep coming back to pace and environment. Brooklyn wants this game ugly. Fewer possessions, longer sets, more physical sequences. Chicago wants tempo, movement, and freedom. In my experience, the home team usually dictates that battle, and Barclays Center has quietly been a place where Chicago struggles to stay composed. There's also the head-to-head angle. I don't believe in coincidences when teams see each other twice in the same season. Brooklyn already proved they can take Chicago out of their comfort zone once, and I don't see a major adjustment from the Bulls that guarantees a different outcome. Injuries also tilt this slightly for me. Chicago's rotation feels stretched, and when fatigue sets in late, that's when decision-making slips. Brooklyn, despite their record, still has enough depth to stay organized down the stretch. So when I put everything together, game control, matchup dynamics, and situational basketball, my prediction is that Brooklyn will win this game at home. It's not about momentum or recent headlines. It's about who dictates the style of play. And tonight, I'm riding with the Nets to grind this one out in their building.